G'day folks, welcome back to another episode of Thommo in Shed, and we are busy today. Today's episode we're going to show you how we finalise and get this chassis set on the jig. We've been talking about it a little while, but now it is done. It's ready to start taking components. And to my right you can see this blue thing right here. That is the setup lock. That's a 216 Chevy straight 6. It was a $50 non-recoverable motor. I'm going to show you what we did to get that to that condition so that we don't have to use this. This is the actual motor we're going to be putting in the car for the event, and this will need a bit of love later. But we did have a problem here with the setup, but I'll explain that later in the episode. In the meantime, don't forget, if you like what we're doing here, hit like, subscribe, hit those notifications, and I think I better pick up some tools and get on with it. This, folks, is the chassis, temporarily jacked up and tacked and secured with these little spacer blocks here. Looks pretty agricultural, but I'll tell you what, it does the job. So if you were watching the last episode, you may remember that I said I wanted to lift the chassis up off the deck so that I had clearance for the sump, which is going to be down through there. So I got these pieces of material which were left over from the jig. They're actually 3.5 inches, plus we've got an inch here. So what that gives us is 4.5 inch float off the deck, which is absolutely spot on. That'd be fine. I was aiming for 4, but 4.5 is close enough. So now I'm going to make some fixture points. So these two holes here exist on both sides of the chassis. So I'm going to make a plate that sits on that and an angle bracket which welds to that. So that'll support that quite nicely. So the back end will be floating, and what that's going to give us though is it's going to give us freedom to drop a leaf spring in there and possibly even float the diff in there, which would be pretty handy. So that turned out to be a bit of a blessing in disguise. Now we walk down the front here. Now as you can see, I've got the same 4.5 inch space there, so this is level and true. Now you'd think the obvious one would be to use these, and why don't we use those ones? What I am going to use, as we come over the top here, is these two here. They're on both sides. So we're just going to make a plate, a bolt plate, and put a stud down through that. So that'll sit on its own little stud, and that'll have nice clearance for bits and pieces, steering gear, gives us a bit of freedom there. So I'm going to do that as well. So that is our first job for the day. We're going to fabricate up some brackets, finalise and fix this thing, and then we can move on to the next job, which is sorting out where our radiator is going to go. I've got a radiator coming in postage, but I'm actually going to use this 28 Chev frame here. It's my piece of artwork, but I think it'll give me what I need to work out where the radiator has to be, so we can start working where the motor's got to be. And of course I've got to tidy up and prep a setup block, but for now let's get these brackets made. Okay, so we're in the little fab bench. This is what we're about to do. We're going to fabricate the primary parts of the 4 brackets. I'm going to use the bench. I'm going to go to overhead so you can sort of see what we're doing, so you can hear what I'm saying, but it's really about see what was happening. And I want to show you the little fixture bench that I use for fabrication. I picked it up from Hare & Forbes, around about $1,000 by the time I bought the clamp kits, but it's just been absolutely priceless. I've never stopped using this thing since I've had it. But I'll show you why it's so cool, and we'll get to that. So let's have a look at that. Excuse the mess, folks, but we are in fabrication mode. So this little bench here is one I got from Hare & Forbes, as I said, and it's one of those fixture benches that is entry level. It's around about 700 Australian dollars to buy, but to be honest, I have not stopped using it since I've got it.
because these holes are set straight and true and square, my favourite word, you can actually just use these fixture lugs to line up your 90s. When you're doing like 45, or you want to put a 45 degree cut, you can float that in there till you get it exactly where you want it to be. Clamp that sucker down. Make sure she's tight. Clamp this one down. And what you know now is that that is perfectly square every single time. And you can now just do your perimeter tacks on each corner, set her in place. You can even do most of the primary welding in place and let it cool down so it doesn't pull and push. But you'll get an angle bracket every single time just perfect. And it just speeds up the process no end. So I'm just going to go quickly knock these up and then we'll get to the T-bracket. So I've got the marks. This is a 5-inch plate, 3-inch centers on center, and we're using this 1.5 inch square tube. So I've marked those up. We're literally going to put it back into our little jig form. We've just got 3 stops and a clamp. We're going to slide that up until she makes contact. Slide this one across until she sets square. Now we know that that's absolutely where we want it to be. Drop the clamp on it. Throw a glow on. And tack her up. So you put your 3 tacks on. This is how quick it is, folks. She's all tacked up, ready to go. We get our second one. We get our pre-made foot. Slide her up. And move it across until she's where she needs to be. Tack the 3 corners. Lock and weld. And now we have the 2 brackets, and all we have to do is run the welds through the corners, and that's ready to go into the chassis. How good is that? So I'm just going to weld these up now, and now we can move on to the chassis from there. Okay, so we've got our front bracket. That's the T bracket we've made, and that's going to be bolted up underneath the chassis and support the chassis in a vertical place, but we need to get it right. So what we do, so I made this a little longer. We're just going to throw it over, make sure it's sitting flush and flat, so not wobbly. And all we do to get the exact distance we need is we take a Sharpie and we mark the underside of the chassis. And that distance there is exactly right. So this becomes off-cut. And once I've trimmed that up and set it up, that will sit perfectly underneath that chassis, and we'll weld this to the jig. So I'll do that first and we'll come back to do the welding. Righto, we've trimmed it all up, we've dressed it. Now we simply bolt it in place. Give that a bit of a spanner, nice and snug. So now we've got this one all in place, that's all bolted in and ready to weld. This is now bolted in and ready to weld, and it doesn't matter about the gap around that because this is bolted secured, it's set with this height here, so all I have to do is put a perimeter weld here and a longitudinal weld on the back, and that is all it needs. It won't go anywhere. You don't need to fully weld it, it's only a jig form. So I'm just going to literally fill the back of that, fill the back of this side here, and do the same on the other side, and the front mounts will be done. That's it, folks. And then we'll move to the back. So it's as easy as this, folks. We're going to line this up. We're going to mark the inside of the chassis where it goes like that. As you can see, this is not perpendicular or square because the chassis tapers, but this is square. So we're going to cut this excess material off, and that piece will slide in behind here, and then we'll be able to weld bound both sides of that, and then weld where it lands in here. So let me just quickly cut that off and we'll do the next bit of fit up. So here it's all cleaned up. Slide it in from behind because of the taper. Sit that in place. You slide it up so it hits the chassis. It's actually going to hold the chassis up. This side plate is just to stop it from drifting. And just to make sure we know exactly where it is, we've marked a line using our set square, so it's true vertical. We've got a little bit of extra material, just so we don't get hooked up. We're just going to take that off, probably a 45 degree, just to dress it off, and then we can weld this in, and then move on to the other side. We've got a tacked in place. She's bolted in, she's flush up, she's hard up. But before we would do this weld, I'm just going to take it off and do the perimeter weld on this and dress that up. And then all we've got left is these two welds here. I'm just going to mark the other side here. And just before I weld these, I'm just going to take a bit of that galvanised off so it makes a nicer weld. So now we bolt this back in. Final time. Making sure holes line up perfectly. And so now we've got this plate done, step bracket. We're just going to put a few welds down here. You only need an inch on the top and an inch on the bottom both sides. You don't need to fully weld that. Once that's secured, we'll do the other side, and that is job done, folks. So let's tack this up and get it done.
Now you probably hear the rain falling on my tin roof. That's what happens when you hang out in Thommo's tin shed. It sounds like the country. But as you can see, we've got all the chassis mounts required to hold this girl in place. All set and secured. Cruise down the back. You can see these ones through here. All mounted. And she is now floating on her own space. we come across, you can see the other one over here. And she is now momentarily ready to be worked on, folks. Now the next task is to set a basic idea of where the radiator is going to sit. As I mentioned earlier, I've got a radiator coming, it's not here yet, but what I am going to use as we go back over here and we look on my wall of coolness is a 1928 Chev grill shelf. Grill surround, radiator cowl, whatever you want to call it, but I've got one up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bolt that in place so I get an idea of where the back edge of the radiator is going to be, so then we can estimate where the motor is going to sit. So we're going to do that next.
$19.28 radiator cowl. It's got a few holes in it there. We've got a bit of patch up work to do. Plus it's not quite the right shape, but we're going to modify that later. But for now, I think what we'll do is we'll get this bolted in. So I get an idea of where the radiator is going to sit. So this is a 216 Stovebolt spare motor. This is the 50 bucker. Now the guy I bought it off says it was suit reconditioning. That tells me that it's probably no good. But in our situation where we need a setup block for the build, this is going to be absolutely ideal. We're just going to go into time lapse for a few minutes. We just got to strip all this down, get all the components off that we don't need, cylinder head, starter motor, manifold, so on and so forth. And we'll get it back to a basic block gearbox configuration. Then we'll get it back into Thommo's shed. We'll give it a bit of a birthday and I'll show you what we're going to do with it from there. In the meantime, sit tight, we'll go time lapse and we'll see you in a bit. G'day folks, welcome back to another day of Thommo's Tin Shed. Back in the shed today, and we're starting the day with problem solving. Now last night I was getting keen, the setup blocks prettied up, ready to go. This bell housing down here was the next on the target. It was going to get a clean up, coat of black paint, bolted onto the block, ready to drop in the chassis behind me. However, the 11th hour I noticed there was a difference in the bell housing. So this one down here doesn't have the casting lugs for the pedal assembly. Let me show you what I mean. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the pedal assembly on the 1935 bell housing. Now this all still works, the clutch assembly is still in place, the 3-speed gearbox. I want to retain all that because this is something I can count on and know exactly where the clutch pedal is going to be. So there's no point in re-engineering anything. The problem I've got is that this was the bell housing I was going to use and it doesn't have the casting lugs on it, slightly different model. So I'm going to use that one for another project. I'm going to create an engine startup frame for that. But it does mean that I don't have to take the gearbox assembly off, remove all the pedal assembly, take the clutch and flywheel assembly out so I can salvage this bell housing right here. Then I'll clean that up. Then it's going on that block to go in that car. So I'm going to have to do that now. So bear with me folks as I get into it. So as I've explained, we need to take some bits off. I'm not going to go time lapse on this one there. This is just rudimentary mechanics. This is just bolting and unbolting stuff. The channel's not really about showing you how to unbolt a gearbox, it's about fabrication. So I'm going to skip the time lapse on this one there. I'm just going to get the job done and I'll get back to you when the setup block and this bell housing are back together. got exactly what we want done this time around. So I think that's this episode wrapped up for this one. We've got the chassis here, it's now pinned away, set on the jig. 216 Stovebolt, we're going to send that over to the motor bay. We're going to give it a bit of a birthday. In a later episode, I'm going to show you how you static start these in the workshop. I'll give you a few tech tips on how to make a harness for it. But for now, this is probably the most important piece right here. As you can see, the setup block's now completed. We've got the right bell housing now on it. We've got the pedal assembly in place. Next episode, we are going to be fitting this into the chassis right here. Now there's some fabrication work to do. There's a few tech tips on how to do captive weld nuts. We've got a few technical aspects on how to use paintable, weldable primer. And a few little bits and pieces like that. But we really got a motor on now. Once this motor is in place, then I can start setting up the substrate floor. We can start doing the basic formwork, the firewall, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be a moment here, but it's going to pick up pace from here. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of Thommo's Tent Shed. Don't forget, if you like what we're doing, hit like, subscribe, hit those notifications, and we'll see you on another episode. But for now, stay cool, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next one.